So this is a map. It's the Oregon Western Colonization Company, which was a company that was formed between Louis W. Hill and a fellow named Watson Davidson. And they bought this property from a Lazard family in Paris, France. And the property went from around Ontario, Oregon, all the way across eastern Oregon. You can see this checkerboard. This was in an old wagon grant. And so they bought that property, and the intent of that purchase that they had was to buy it and then start selling it off. And so what they wanted to do was they built it, they made this nice map, 800,000 acres, 6 billion board feet of timber, talked about all this was their advertisement. And this is just a great piece of history for this area. So what happened in this, they bought this back in about 1910. So pre-depression, and they held it, and they were having trouble. They were able to actually sell a bunch. So Sweet Home is right in this area right here, and Lebanon's right in here. But they were able to get rid of a bunch of this land that was out in the valley for farming. So they sold that, and then they had this piece of property that went all the way across like this. Well, in about 1914 or 15, Mr. Hill and Mr. Davidson decided they didn't want to be partners anymore. And so they decided to split up. And so Mr. Davidson told Mr. Hill, you divide it into 2 equal halves, and I choose the half I want. So Mr. Hill, being a pretty smart fella, he did something like this in the green, which was all the old growth Douglas fir timber, the old growth pine timber. Right in this area, right in here is where Black Butte Ranch is today. And then the rest of this acreage, which was a lot more acreage in this little bit. So Mr. Hill, being the smart guy, he says, I choose the west piece. Well, that was the timbered piece. So they split up. Mr. Davidson went his way. Mr. Hill maintained this property. So a lot of this property over in here became some of the old Hudspeth Timber Companies and Ochco Lumber Company and Brooks Scanlon. And so they ended up, and so before I came here, most of this was already sold off to Black Butte, to a great big ranch that was there, the Black Butte Ranch, which became the Black Butte Ranch, the resort. When I was a kid, it was a cattle ranch. As I grew up, it became a resort. There's still a few cows out there for show. And then so then Mr. Hill set up for this piece of property, what we basically see right here was in 1917, is what they call a 1917 trust. And we're still working on that premise today. I work for the trust company, which is U.S. Bank. It was First Bank in St. Paul, and Mr. Hill actually built First Bank. And then First Bank was merged with U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank became the trust company for the Hill Timber Limited Partnership. So anyway, we have about 145,000 acres that we manage right here, all in Linn County. And of course, it's blocked up now. Over the years, we've purchased property from different owners, from different companies. We bought a lot of the old Brownsville timber out in the Middle Ridge area. It was a company called Brownsville Timber, and some other companies sold out. And so now we have about 145,000 acres here in this area. But that's kind of the history as Oregon was developing in the timber companies. Mr. Hill is the son of James J. Hill that started this. He's a son of James J. Hill that built the Great Northern Railroad. And Mr. Hill, the James J. Hill, developed Glacier National Park, developed the Great Northern Railroad, hired the Stevens, the engineer, to get the railroad into Seattle. And over the mountains here, Stevens Pass, the same Stevens that engineered and built the Panama Canal.